The responsibility of the church to train believers is foundational to fulfilling its mission. Training involves equipping individuals with a deep understanding of faith, doctrinal principles, and practical wisdom. This empowers believers to navigate life's challenges with resilience and grace. Beyond theological knowledge, training instills values, cultivates character, and nurtures spiritual gifts. This preparation is crucial for believers to actively contribute to the church's mission, whether in community service, leadership roles, or sharing the gospel. Ultimately, the church's responsibility to train believers is about fostering a vibrant, spiritually mature community capable of impacting the world positively. This is Dr. Ray. Welcome to this week's Hosea International Speaks. This week's session is probably geared more toward the pastor of the local church in order to equip his or her parishioners to carry out the work of the ministry and be more effective in the community. If they are equipped, they will be more apt to take on anything that comes their way. They will feel more and be more competent in their walk, better prepared to handle everyday situations that may come their way. Last week we looked, or the last few weeks, we looked at how the mind is transformed to the ways of Yahweh, which can change the way an individual thinks and how effective his or her lifestyle is. That is how they act towards others and how they act toward Yahweh. Acts 13, go ahead and turn there if you would. We want to see the pattern of how transformed lives can become the foundation of the future, or for the future of a local church, and soon become a global ecclesia. We can use the word global, which will include both global and local. This chapter can be divided into 4 sections, and we will deal with all 4 sections individually. Let's look at how it's divided. The first part deals with the making of the materials and the vessels for city transportation. I'll give you the verses later on. The second part of it deals with the intensive training and development of the new disciples. Thirdly, we can see the transfer of grace and legacy into the new disciples who have matured in their alliance with the Apostle Paul. Lastly, we can see the impact this alliance had on the spiritual atmosphere and spirituality of the city itself. Those who practiced magic disclosed their hidden activities and they repented. We can also see how the alliance of honorable men in the house impacted the business world and dominance of idolatry in this chapter. Well, let's begin by making the formation, or with the formation of the vessel. We can see that in Acts chapter 19, verses 1 through 7. Paul discovered some disciples of Apollos when he arrived in Ephesus. The wise master builder immediately sought to find out the quality of the materials that had been left behind. He tested and he tried these vessels, or these individuals. He took them through an accurate process to improve the quality of their life, their knowledge of Yahweh and his ways, their experiences of the Holy Spirit, and also their passion for a greater future. And as you know, in reading it, you found out that they had only been baptized in that of the John and not baptism of the Holy Spirit. Now, this can be seen in verses of 1 through 7 of Acts 19. Second, Paul wanted to qualify the vessels by taking them through intensive training through his teaching, which impacted and empowered them to rise above the synagogue style meetings that they had been accustomed to. You can see that in chapter 19, verses 8 through 10. Many could not fit after learning or after being trained into the old wineskins. That is, they had grown spiritually and found out that they could no longer fit in the straitjacket of the institutional religion. However, some who chose the old wineskin or chose to stay where they're at, even after tasting of the new wine, rose up to attack those who were ready to go on in Yahweh. We can see the repeat of Acts 19 in the charismatic era of the 70s. Many who had tasted the new wine did not cross over to the other side, in contrast to those who drank of their fill and became changed. Eventually, they had become, or they've started to harden their hearts, and that grieves the Holy Spirit. They stayed happily in their own wineskin, even though they had come to know Holy Spirit. They soon became disobedient, refused to hear the proceeding word and the progressive revelation. We tend to see that after each movement. If you was to read about Martin Luther, obviously you can see that the Catholic Church did not want to move. Then after the Martin Luther movement, then there was the Wesleyan movement with the Wesley brothers, and you begin to see that even the Lutherans did not want to move into the next movement. And then even after the Wesleyans came in on with their sanctification, we can see also in the 30s, or when in the 1930s, or the early 1900s, we begin to see the carrots or the outpouring of the Spirit. And they, the Wesleyans and the Lutherans, didn't want to move into what we call the gifts of the Spirit with the evidence of speaking in tongues. And then you can begin to see the next movement, the healing movement, and that with the beginning of the pastors coming in, or the evangelists and the pastors, then the teachers, and then the prophets and the apostles. And people still today do not want to move into that next movement. Those who decided to move on into the new, when we go back to that of the 70s, did as Paul, who withdrew the disciples and took them away to an intensive training school of Tyrannus. Today, there are schools that a lot of us, instead of being trained in the churches, they're going off to a college or a religious college to get more training. That we can see because the church failed to train those in the church to be better stewards of the gifts that were given to them and move in their area or in their city so that they could be more powerful and more relevant to the people in the city. So the students would go off to college. And we even see that today, that churches are not doing that. But now that seems to be changing. At the turn of the century, 2000 churches began to train their members and how to become more effective in their community. Those who decided to move into the new did as Paul did. He withdrew his disciples and he took them to the school of Tyrannus. He taught them for 2 years. That seems to be about the length, 2 to 3 years training, and he impacted their lives. They became carriers of the message and revelation of Yahweh. They filled Ephesus with their doctrine. In other words, they followed after the footsteps of those of Acts chapter 5 and verse 28. The training they received in the school inspired the disciples to break and to lead beyond the walls of the church. All the Jews and the Greeks heard the word of Yahweh. The formation and fashioning of the vessels with the intensified training qualified the disciples for the third phase for the divine transfer. Paul began to empower them. Acts chapter 19, 11 through 20. He transferred his gifts grace and legacy into those whom he was mentoring and fathering. This is when the ecclesia or the church will see Yahweh doing extraordinary work in the city. When the members and disciples can do what the set man, the pastor or the senior minister can do, then the work of Yahweh advances them to another level. Apostle Paul was reproducing himself in his disciples. They were doing what he was graced and gifted to do. We will see an increase not only in miracles, signs, and wonders, but also an increase of miracle workers. For the first time, we see the membership of the church, the ecclesia, rising to this miraculous realm and stature. The order that we begin to see in the empowering disciples is, first, Jesus is the primary source, Acts 2:22. Then the apostles come, Acts 2:43. Then we see the second generation or the next generation of leaders coming into view or coming into their calling, Acts 6:8 and chapter 8:6. Then there are the breakthrough believers, Acts 11:26. And then we see the sons of the house performing miracles by carrying out the instructions of Paul, Acts 19:11 through 12. And we give a lot of attention to the miracles that were performed through the handkerchiefs that we neglect to see that it was the sons or the daughters of the house that carried the handkerchiefs in order for the miracle to occur. And lastly, we see the impact on the different domains. In Acts chapter 19, we can see that when competent members rise up, the spiritual atmosphere and climate of the cities will be changed. The spiritual, the business, and the political domains will be affected and impacted. Yahweh is revealing to the current church, the current ecclesia, that there is a higher possibility and a better promise of a greater future for the church and for the ecclesia. She does not have to become intimidated, victimized, and become paralyzed by the fear and frustration as the natural city grows in development and progresses economically, because she, the church, continues to grow as they hear by the Holy Spirit. The church must rise or raise a company of breakthrough believers who are competent to take on the world and bring transformation. Those within the church must move up and become equipped for the task to exercise dominion in every domain. Yes, in the 7 mountains. The church will find Yahweh's power to transform lives, bring the people up progressively until they are fitted and held together. They can then synergize and capture the power of one. The church is Yahweh's royal, regal, and holy people, chosen for his kingdom's role and function. The church will display an excellence in the earth. Then the Shebas of the earth will know something greater than in the days of Solomon is here. The church of Ephesus impacted the political, social, economical, and spiritual domain effectively within the 3 years of Paul's intensive work there. He was with them, teaching them, training them, and revealing to them the whole counsel of Yahweh. Acts chapter 20, verses 20, 27, 31, and 35. The results of total transformation of the cities can be made possible through accurate changes within the lives of the people in the church. When we find the vessels of honor fit for the master's use, then the process of kingdom advancement becomes easy. It is not just collecting people as we go or getting everyone into our meetings that is essential, but the transformation of these lives so that they can become choice instruments who can be trained on what Yahweh has begun in the city through the set man, you, the pastor. Well, if you enjoyed this session, go ahead and hit the like button. And you might want to tell those who are not pastors, you might want to tell all the other pastors, go ahead and listen to this portion. And then if you wish to subscribe, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Wish to give, go ahead and scan the QR code. Tell a family, tell a member of the household, tell a friend, tell your pastors, and even somebody you may not even like. Tune in like your enemies. Well, this is Dr. Ray, and I'll see you next week on Hosea International Speaks.